Good evening and welcome to the City of Dublin Board of Zoning Appeals. You can join the meeting in person at 5555 Perimeter Drive and also access the meeting via the live stream on the city's website. We welcome public participation, including public comments on cases. The meeting procedure for the case this evening will begin with staff presentation, followed by an opportunity for the applicant to make a presentation. The board will then have the opportunity to ask clarifying questions, first of staff, then of the applicant, prior to hearing any public comments. Finally, the board will deliberate on the case. Before we get to our case this evening, we're going to have our oath of office for our new member, Dan. Here.
Mr. Nye?
Here.
Mr. Clower?
Here.
Mr. Murphy?
Here.
Mr. Garvin?
Here.
Mr. Murphy?
Here.
Mr. Garvin?
Here.
With regard to the meeting of June 23, 2022, do we have a motion to, for the record, to approve the minutes?
I move to accept the minutes for June 23rd, 2022.
Second, please.
Second.
Roll, please.
Mr. Nye?
Yes.
Mr. Garvin?
I'll abstain. I wasn't a member of the board yet.
Mr. Deschler?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Clower?
Yes.
With regard to swearing in the witnesses, I'll ask anybody that's going to be intending to address the board for the case this evening to stand and raise your right hand and answer in the affirmative. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony to this board?
10-foot private utility easement along the rear property line and a 5-foot easement along the left property line, which services a main sanitary sewer. No encroachments are permitted within the side yard easement. Existing conditions of the paver patio and associated features are shown. The left image is facing northwest, and the image on the right is facing southeast towards the rear of the house. And the pavers do not contain any mortar, so they are easily movable. And the wood beams and raised fire pit are also non-permanent. So the required rear yard setback is 25 feet as stated in the development text for Sandy Corners. The property owner constructed the paver patio and associated site features without a permit and is requesting a variance to permit a 15-foot encroachment into the rear yard setback and allow these features to remain in its existing location. The paver patio and associated features were constructed within the side yard setback and easement, and then in the rear yard setback. While these items are still constructed within these areas today, I'd like to acknowledge that the applicant has worked with planning to understand what the development standards are. With that, the applicant wanted to still pursue the variance and modified their original variance request on the site plan to only encroach into the rear yard setback. And as stated in the applicant's statement, their intent is to remove any encroachments into the side yard setback and easement, as encroachments into this easement are not negotiable. So planning will ensure that the applicant will remove the encroachments into the side yard easement and setback. And the first set of the non-use variance review criteria, all criteria is required to be met. Staff finds that the applicant does not meet the 3 required criteria as follows. There are no special conditions or practical difficulties that would prevent the applicant from meeting the required development standards as they apply to all properties within the Sandy Corners subdivision. Secondly, the variance request is necessitated by the applicant as a result of installing the patio features without required permits and being in the improper location. Lastly, if the variance is granted, The location of the patio and associated features would impact adjacent neighboring properties if the encroachment for the variance is granted. Encroachments into setbacks really defeats the purpose of providing adequate separation between properties, green space, and areas which provide access to utilities and drainage. In the second set of non-use variance review criteria, at least 2 of the following are required to be met. Staff finds that the applicant is only meeting 1 of the following criteria. First, approving the variance would grant the applicant special privileges to allow the encroachment. Staff has found other locations on the property where this patio can be relocated and meet all development standards as well. The request is not recurrent in nature to warrant a code update. Allowing any encroachments into the rear yard setbacks really defeats the purpose of setbacks in general. The paver patio and associated features are not permanent and they're easily movable, so therefore there's really no reason that this can't be moved to another location. Staff finds that criteria 3 is met, which indicates if the location of the patio and the variance would adversely affect the delivery of government services, which it does not. And then lastly, other options exist for the paver patio and associated features to be relocated elsewhere on the property. So with that, planning recommends disapproval of the non-use area variance to zoning code section 153.074 B6A. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicant's in attendance this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. Do we have any questions for staff?
I have one at this time. The first set of criteria, number 3, impacting the neighbors. Did you hear from neighbors? Is that what that's based on?
That is correct.
I just wanted for that for the hearing is you've actually heard from them that will impact them, not just your own belief, correct?
Yes.
Any other questions for staff this time? I have one question. You had mentioned that there was a rear easement or some easement in the back of the property. Can you pull that one picture up? The yellow.
I also have the site plan that the applicant submitted as well. This is just, this image, I should say, is not to scale. If you'd like me to pull up the other one, I'm happy to.
Will it show the rear easement?
It will.
Yeah, let's do that, please. And here's my question, then while you're pulling that up, is there going to have to be some waiver or application to have this in the easement then for the rear portion?
So the patio and associated features are not within the rear yard easement. It's just encroaching into the setback. So they actually fully clear that rear yard easement.
Okay. Can you pull it up and take a look at it?
Is that allow you to zoom that at all or not? Is that what you're looking at, Jason? Do I see that part of it?
Mm-hmm.
But just while we're waiting, this is a good conversation to be had. Any type of encroachments and easements do require permission by the engineering staff. Some they approve, some they won't. Taylor had reached out to our engineering staff specifically about, I'm speaking of the side yard easement, and engineering would not approve that easement encroachment, and that's why we had instructed the applicant to remove that.
Okay, so when it was originally built, it encroached in the side yard easement, but it did not encroach in the rear easement.
That is correct.
Okay. Tell me about the certificate of zoning plan approval as well. You note that in your report. I was just wondering, you can provide some additional detail on that. I appreciate it.
Yes, so the applicant would be required to apply for a certificate of zoning plan approval. It's planning's version of a permit to be able to have this be permitted if the variance is approved this evening. Otherwise, of course, they wouldn't need to get it if they have to remove the patio and features.
I mean, is that something that obviously should have been done at the outset? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Do you have any other questions for staff at this time? Robin, you good? Okay. All right. Thanks, Taylor. We'll probably have more questions at some point in time. Mr. Kester, would you like to present, please? Yep. Go right over there, and there should be a little button right on the mic. They'll turn green.
Got it.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for giving us a chance to come in here and speak. Outside of what I had already submitted in the variance letter and the site map and the pictures, I really just wanted to say, first of all, if I had known that the paperwork and the approvals were required, I wouldn't have built it first. And I know that my ignorance is not an excuse for anything, and that shouldn't have any effect on your decision, but I just kind of wanted to apologize for working outside of process and causing a lot of unnecessary work. Secondly, I wanted to thank Tammy, Taylor, Mike, Zach, throughout the entire process from the first time I met them. They've been wonderful, extremely helpful, and just obviously willing to serve and support the residents. So I really, really appreciate that. Outside of that, I'm here to answer any questions you guys have.
I mean, we can go right into the questions. I didn't know if you wanted, for the record, obviously we have your statement. If you wanted to give what I would say an overview of, your application, and then I'm going to need you to specifically, or we are going to need you to specifically delineate how you think the city is incorrect in its determination of not meeting any of the criteria, of which you have to have all of the criteria in the primary section, and then in the secondary section. I don't have the code sections in front of me. I can talk on the record on it. Yes, so obviously you have to meet every single criteria under code section 153.231, capital H2 little a, and then 2 out of the 4 on section 153.231 H2 little b. If you could let us know how you believe you're able to meet those criteria, that would be great.
The ones that are on the board right now are the 3 that you have to meet in order for us to approve it. And then once you tell those, I'm sure that Taylor can go on to the next slide, which are the 2 out of 4.
Oh. Yeah, I think that's right. Okay. Okay.
While they're checking that out, Taylor, quick question for you. Did we have any precedential cases that were, I didn't see any in the documents that were submitted. Is there any similar type cases as this that you wanted the board to consider?
To the best of my knowledge, no, there are no similar cases.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. So addressing the first one, the special conditions, from my standpoint, the reason we chose the location on the property that we did was because we weren't able to fit the size in any other space on the property with existing landscape, the swing sets that's there, and the deck that exists on the back of the house. Now it seems that Taylor's findings are in argument with that, but that was our position. Inaction of the applicant. So I guess from this, I understand what she says about it was necessitated because we built the patio without having the proper approvals. But if I would have gone through the approval process, I would have had, I guess, the same in the right order. I would have had the same stance. So I don't know that this is necessitated because we built it. It's necessitated because we felt that this is the only place and that it would fit on the property. And then finally, the material impairment purposes. Associated. As far as the impairment to adjacent neighbors, I don't understand how that is true, honestly. I know that when my neighbor reached out to them, he was upset because the construction process had spilled some dirt onto his yard, and it was a whole process, but I had explained to him from the very start, my intention was to fix it, level it, grade it, and plant grass and get it back to its original state. We didn't build anything on his property, but some of the dirt as we were excavating spilled over. With that said, what I've learned about the setback on the side yard, now we will be moving, if the setback on the rear yard is approved to be infringed upon, we'll be moving the side yard even farther from the property line. So we'll be a full 6 feet off the property line. So as far as again, the impairment to the neighbors, that I don't fully understand how that's true.
Thank you, Mr. Kester. Do we have any questions? I mean, I have a couple, but I'm going to defer to my other board members here before I ask some questions. And let's try to focus with regard to the elements in the A section of 153.231.
I have a question for you about the first criteria. So because you don't hear all these and we do, I'll give you an example. So special criteria would be you have a very narrow lot or a pie-shaped lot, you have a river running through it, something that's unique and different to your property than others. Reading the city standard and then obviously looking at the site, the lot looks pretty standard and similar to the other ones. Is there something else that you have? I don't see anything, I'll just tell you, that's unique about your property that would require you to have to put it in that location. Is there something else you can
Right. The only thing I feel is the existing location of landscaping, the swing set, the deck on the property that allows the only open spaces in the northwest corner.
And I think I'll just, not to deliberate at the same time, but I guess I'll ask you this then. So the second one, which ties into the first then, is anything from the applicant done to create that? So the swing set, I think the other part was a trampoline, and then the landscaping, those aren't naturally occurring features. Those are things that were put there for you guys to use at the home,
Sure.
correct?
And honestly, the swing set and probably a portion of the trampoline sit on the setback. So if we were to put the patio in a location that is within the bounds that we're able to build, it would render those unusable because you would come off the slide and the bottom of the slide would be on the patio.
But could you choose, I guess my question was, could you choose to remove those items? Could you
Yeah.
place those instead of this? Okay.
Yeah, that's an option. I understand.
How, it's been mentioned that the patio is not a permanent fixture, that it could be moved. How permanent fixtures are the swing set and trampoline? Could they be moved as well?
The trampoline, I mean, yeah, it's staked into the ground, but stakes could be pulled. It could be lifted up. The swing set, as far as I know, it's just sitting on top of the ground, but it's been there since we bought the house. So I'll say it's never been moved that I'm aware of, but I think it just sits on top of the ground.
Because the trees on the western side of the house, the two established trees, obviously preclude it from being built on that side of the house. But if you were to switch the positions of the swing set and the patio, then you could build the patio further into the backyard and not interfere with the functionality of the swing set, which obviously is inconvenient that instead of having to move just the patio, you would have to move both. But was there any consideration given to that when you realized that it would be a problem?
There was not, no.
So you mentioned the change to the designs originally that had impacted, it sounds like, your neighbor on one side. I would assume you guys hadn't directly heard any complaints from the other neighbors. First, is that the case?
Actually, no, no complaints from any of the other neighbors. In fact, one of the pictures I sent Taylor to show kind of what we're working with had about 4 or 5 other families hanging out on the patio.
Okay.
None of the other neighbors have voiced any concerns. In fact, many of them have voiced support.
Okay. The one concern I would have there is that, those are the current neighbors. Obviously, that can change
Sure.
if you're impacting just the one side adversely, just the rear setback portion. A new neighbor who moves in could be negatively affected by that relative to their neighbors around them. Would you
Right.
agree?
Yes, yeah, it's entirely possible.
And then the other thing I note is that I guess by kind of leaving it right up against the setback on one side, you still don't allow really for a possibility of landscaping that might ease privacy concerns for that neighbor. But again, that's not a requirement, just
Right.
something I note.
The photos, can you pull up some of the photos that were in the OneDrive? I don't know who took the photos. They were just in the OneDrive.
The surface level ones.
Mhm.
Do you want these photos or the ones that were provided in the packet?
Whatever was in the OneDrive, something like that.
They don't all it doesn't have the patio on it. There's some, oh yeah, like that, yeah. What other one? They don't all
Yeah.
have it.
Is the wood structure, are there footers underneath that?
The posts are cemented in. They're about 30 inches deep, 32 inches deep.
Did you do this yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
This is a question for the city. If they were to remove the patio but keep the accessory structure where it stands, does that fit within the requirements of the? No.
No, it, excuse me, all the paver patio and all the associated features would have to be fully removed out of the rear yard setback.
What's the difference between this type of structure, which we've thrown around the words open and uncovered a fair amount in other meetings? What's the difference between this structure and something like a swing set?
I guess the primary, if we were to apply that section of the code, which that's an interesting conversation, that would allow the applicant to move 5 feet into the setback.
Could they have the patio underneath it then? I think they
That's-
would not be able to, right?
I would almost feel more comfortable with allowing the patio to encroach 5 feet under the open and uncovered, because again, the concept of open and uncovered is there is nothing that violates your view shed. And I know that we've talked about this pretty extensively in a previous case. In this particular instance, those posts would, although minimal, they would block your view. So I guess that would be, one, I don't think it accomplishes what the applicant wants. And two, I'm not sure that I would even allow that structure to fall under that provision.
But if this were a more traditional swing set, just like an A-frame swing set with nothing else in it, and it had concrete footing, and it was just a singular swing set, that would be permittable, right?
It would be permittable, but only because city council has allowed swing sets to be in setbacks as a holistic across the city, because we were having so many issues. They actually put a resolution in place that allows neighbors to build swing sets, even if they're permanently affixed in any setbacks. That wouldn't be the case for easements, but it would be for setbacks.
And what about slackline stands or hammock stands? was the provision, did that handle those as well?
I would have to read the ordinance. I think it captures the trampoline, but I don't think it says anything about hammocks, cycling stands. It has to be very specific. If council's going to allow that to encroach, they would have to specifically identify that structure.
Timmy, isn't the open and obvious aspect, or the open and uncovered, open and obvious, the open and uncovered aspect, that's from, all those provisions are related to something that's attached, but that was attached to structure to the house.
I think by default, it typically is attached to the house
Right.
because again, it's only giving you latitude to get 9 times out of 10, property owners have either built the structure or the structure and their outdoor space pretty close to the rear yard setback. So the reason why we get these so close to the house is because they don't have any room left. In this particular instance, the applicant has a decent amount of space before you get to the rear yard setback, whereas many of the cases that the board hears, literally, a lot of them are on the setback.
Can you go to the, I think it's the last, it's one of the last, I don't know, it's not that one. It's the one that shows like kind of where the trampoline and their deck is.
Off the tree.
Yeah, I don't know. It's the maple is right in front.
Kind of shows the landscape here.
Taken from the side?
Yes. That's it. I have it right here on my. You got it.
We're looking at the photos that are in the OneDrive pictures album. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah. So on the Mr. Kessler, on the left photo here, on the you can see it.
Yeah.
It looks as if.
Rock climbing walls on the side of it.
We have anything else? We're ready for public comment and discussion.
Well, I want to make sure the applicant has an opportunity. Can you tell us with the second section under 153.231, capital H2, lowercase b, again, assuming that you were able to meet all the criteria in the prior section, you're still not meeting the criteria, which would require 2 of the 4 criteria. You have 1 met, so you would need 1 more of 1, 2, or 4 to be met. Can you tell us, which one or ones of those you think that you've met?
Sure. Again, from our perspective, there wasn't another location in the yard for it to fit. So that's why I guess number 4 would be the one that I felt we cleared there. And again, I recognize some of the discussion that we've had that some other considerations we may not, but that was
Right. So number 4, it obviously reads, even if the solution is less convenient or more costly to achieve. It sounds like those would be the reasons why you don't think it would work. Is there some other reasons besides those reasons that you can think to meet that section?
no.
We may have some additional questions. I don't have any more right now. Does anybody else? Do we have any public comment? None. Mr. Kessler, if you want, you can stand there for a second, or you can take a seat. We may ask 1 or 2 more questions as we kind of discuss this. It's up to you.
Sure. And just to be fair, my wife just pointed out something. The the pictures that you showed looking from the west at the deck and the maple tree in that area that was discussed there, we did evaluate that if we were to build off of the deck and change the shape. Yeah, these right here. Truthfully, if you look at the overhead of our property, that side yard on the west side of the house and this area that you're seeing in between the maple and the deck is a direct racetrack for the kids running to and from the backyard. Now, while that can't, obviously the kids can take a different route. Again, we'd still be dealing with the situation of either we're adjusting existing landscaping or we're encouraging on the side yard. There's a 5-foot setback on the east side. There's no easement, but there's a 5-foot setback. And after meeting with the planning department, I did go out there with a tape measure, and to be in that 5-foot setback, we would be coming into the landscaping that's around the deck, or to stay out of that landscaping, we would be in the 5-foot setback.
If I may, the side yard setback is actually 6 feet
Is it
and a
6?
13 feet total. I think you're thinking of the side yard easement, which
Oh,
is 5.
Thank you for keeping me honest there. Sorry about that.
And the easement is in addition to the setback? They're additive? No, or,
So the left side yard, 5-foot easement, and then you have the 6 side yard setback. So it'd be 1 additional foot. So they're within each other.
okay, thank you.
Hey, Taylor or Tammy, keep me honest here. I could be forgetting. Has the board previously required a removal of a structure in this instance where the staff is requesting disapproval?
Yes, and actually more permanent structures than this.
Okay.
And that's only the cases that would come before this board. We do this as a compliance issue
Sure.
commonly.
Okay. Mr. Kester, I think we're good now. So hang tight. We may have some more questions. Why doesn't everybody tell me what their thoughts are here on this?
We have public comment though first.
Already asked. No public comment. Yep.
Incongruity between your statements and what we have here. Your statement said it was the actual construction was the complaint, the issue. Do we have actual statements from the neighbors themselves, or?
I've talked to our code enforcement officers who were originally involved with the case, and they simply said that, and I don't want to paraphrase this too much because I wasn't party to the conversation, but that they were concerned about the structure. It was close enough where they were concerned that it was on their property, but even with that, it was too close to their property. And this happened, I believe, and I'll allow the applicant to fill any information that I'm not providing. Since that original conversation, we've only had one other conversation with the complainant. And just because we have a new member, I would say staff would still be concerned about a structure this close to a property line, regardless if there's a complaint. Obviously, it magnifies when there's a complaint. But the intent of setbacks is to provide a spatial separation for property owners. So I don't want to put all of our eggs in the basket that there was a complainant, but there was, and we have been in contact at least 2 times.
Okay. Yeah, I think that that covers my inquiries. Definitely trying to find the most charitable way of handling this, but unfortunately, we are tied by the language of the code here, and I've given that information and what's been stated before. I don't really see much of an avenue toward granting the variance, given the language of the code. But I'll allow anyone else to speak as to that if there's a dispute there.
Dan, do you have any thoughts?
It seems like obviously you guys have a great relationship with your neighbors currently. and I can see how this could even be a benefit to everyone around. But my big concern is that neighbors can change, things can change, and I do think, it could negatively affect people in the future.
So it sounds as if you're supportive of staff's recommendation for disapproval.
I am.
Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, there's just too much working against you here. I think you do have options to move it. It doesn't have to be as big. I think you can still capture what you want within that land, although it may not necessarily be specifically where you'd want it. I think you're going to be able to get some enjoyment just in a different location and perhaps not as large. So here's the thing, though. We have a couple options here. If you want us to vote, you're going to get disapproved. We're going to go with staff's recommendation. You do have the option to, I believe, table, ask for an adjournment or something to that effect. Is that fair, Tammy? And essentially end up being a withdrawal of your application if you want to take it down and move it yourself. But I'm not sure that's going to change much in this instance.
I don't think that's an enforcement issue, not a zoning improvement.
It's not a code enforcement. This is a variance request. The code enforcement would be a separate situation.
So if the question is, yes, every applicant can table. Staff, and we've met a couple times, and the applicant's been very gracious to meet with us. If there were an avenue that we could pursue, similar to what this conversation has been about, I would say a tabling might help, but we're just out of options to recommend. Unless I'm missing something, I don't want to overstate. The reason why the board is having this discussion is once you get a decision, you can't reapply to the board for 1 calendar year. So
I can do to make it right. So, yeah, thank you guys.
With no more cases, any communications? Tammy, Zach, Taylor, anything?
we do have communications.
Of course we do.
Next week, we have asked, along with City Council is hosting a meeting with the Board of Zoning Appeals, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the Architectural Review Board to collectively have a dialogue with City Council about several issues. First and foremost, council objectives that they meet yearly and identify, sharing those with the boards and commissions so that you hear where their priorities are. One of the other items is hearing any type of issues that the board members may have yourself, either about process, about code regulations, anything that you think rises to a council level. We are discussing sustainability practices, which has been a topic, quite frankly, that staff has brought to the forefront for council. We are getting significant inquiries about certain sustainability practices that currently our code doesn't address. And we're looking for some guidance from City Council, so you'll benefit from hearing from those discussions. And Zach's been kind enough to give you the approved agenda. And I apologize, it's so late. We literally just got this today. So this meeting will occur in council chambers. We're not hosting this, so I want to make sure I'm correct. It's next Wednesday, 6 to 8. There will be dinner provided for everyone, and staff, of course, will be in attendance as well. That's the first and foremost. The second thing I wanted to announce, I believe Nikki Martin has only presented to this board once, but we unfortunately, she went to the private sector. So we are published, we have 2 positions published currently. So there will be some new hires with our staff. And last but not least, we just published an RFP for a community plan update. It just went on our website a day ago. So we'll be entering into